because you're the guy supporting. Remember me? Yeah.
We are not going to give up. We're going to win. We've been winning. We're going to continue to win. We're gonna stick together. We're going to unite. As it is right now, we've been united all through indigenous countries, and we're gonna fight back. We're gonna continue until we are a free nation. I gave 50 years for that. You know, and I'm going to give the rest of my life. So. They haven't broken. They have not broke me. I have not broken.
Paul Mwite is one of a team of lawyers who represented Mau Mau freedom fighters in court in the UK about a decade ago. He reads an extract of Wambugu Mnyingi's testimony.
Where the corpses had been placed, awaiting burial.
Mnyingi, alongside others, testified in 2012 in London. They told the court that they were tortured by British security forces during Kenya's fight for independence. The UK later settled the case out of court. Wambugu died 2 years ago. Mwite says some African leaders have failed their freedom fighters.
The leaders get into office after independence to line their pockets, that's the issue, at the expense of the people.
The Mau Mau rebellion started in 1952. More than 10,000 Kenyans were killed, many were tortured, displaced from their homes, their land taken away by British settlers. The British government founded this memorial site. It's a reminder of what happened and sacrifices that were made by those who died. The UK also expressed regret of abuses that were committed during colonial rule. But many Kenyans say they want a proper apology. The wounds of slavery and colonialism remain unhealed in Africa. During that time, important cultural artifacts and treasures were stolen and are still displayed in museums in Europe and the US. So this year's Africa Union Summit theme is reparations and justice.
The moment you ask for reparations, the other party would have to first and foremost say, I'm sorry. Without saying sorry, without an apology, there cannot be reparations. And the people who stole all the things that we are talking about have not rendered any apology.
Many Kenyans who fought for independence died poor and disillusioned. Those still alive say there is not much to celebrate. Catherine Soy, Al Jazeera, Nairobi.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.
Uhuru, comrades, and welcome to today's Hands Off Uhuru webinar, in which we salute African history and the struggle of African people, which is courageously pushing back the serious repression by the colonial state as the crisis of imperialism deepens. We are honored to have with us today Onezene Shatella, President of the African People's Education and Defense Fund, Cam Howard, who heads up Reparations United, along with Comrade Paul Pumphrey, co-founder of Friends of the Congo, and Dr. Matsumela Odom, who is the President of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. I am Soliana Bakel, proud managing editor of the Burning Spear newspaper, and I will be your MC today, taking you through our amazing program. We salute our leadership, Chairman Omali Shatella and Deputy Chair Onezene Shatella, and of course, Chair Moise Odom, who is the chair of Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa. Our theme today is the salute to African history. We believe the driving force of history, what pushes history forward, is the struggle of African people and colonized peoples against colonialism. Chairman Omali Shatella represents the worldwide struggle of African and oppressed peoples for the total liberation of Africa and the liberation of all oppressed and colonized peoples against what Chairman has called the colonial mode of production. Chairman Omali set out a goal in 1980 to make the demand for reparations a household word. He built the first of many annual tribunals on reparations to African people in 1982 in Brooklyn, New York, and it's actually immortalized here in this book. The verdict is in: reparations now, can get your own copy at theburningspear.store. We, of course, want to note that, the people had a profound victory this week as well when our comrade, the indigenous freedom fighter, Leonard Peltier, was freed from prison after being locked up for nearly 50 years, thanks to the struggles of the people. We are honored to say that the official Leonard Peltier Support Committee is a valued member of the Hands Off Uhuru Fightback Coalition, and we are proud to have worked with this powerful committee for the past 2 years. We recognize that the freedom of Leonard Peltier is a victory for all African and colonized peoples fighting for our liberation and for the struggle to free all political prisoners. Our party, the African People's Socialist Party, worked with the movement to free Leonard Peltier since the 1980s. Fun fact, Biko Lumumba, who is actually the father of our comrade Janaba, whom some of you have met down in Florida during the trial, spoke at a rally to free Leonard Peltier in the Bay Area of California back in the 80s. So, the party and the movement has long been in solidarity and in the struggle to free political prisoners. And with that, we also want to say that we must free Mumia Abu-Jamal now and all political prisoners. The struggle continues. We are winning. And of course, Uhuru. So moving on with our program, we want to go ahead and get started with our opening presentation, and we will have that up. Uhuru, we of course, want as many people to attend this program, so go ahead and share this webinar with friends and family and comrades. You can go to, handsoffuhuru.org/events to do that, register. You can also go to the Burning Spear YouTube channel to share the link there, to join and make this amazing program happening right now. Next slide. So this event is, of course, dedicated to saluting the long history of African resistance, of which our movement today is both the inheritor and the practitioner of the same struggle. The Hands Off Uhuru Fightback Coalition, next slide please, was established in July 8, 2023, and it is a non-sectarian anti-colonial free speech coalition to make the demand to drop the charges against Uhuru 3 and, of course, to defend the right to anti-colonial free speech. Next slide. We, of course, want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, our fearless leader who has remained relentless in the African liberation movement, providing leadership to the worldwide struggle for freedom of African people and colonized people. Next slide. We also salute Deputy Chair Ona Zane Yeshitela, the architect of the Black Power Blueprint, relentlessly working to put into practice Chairman's vision of building dual and contending economic power. We are honored, of course, to have her as part of this program, so stick around for that presentation. Next slide. We also want to salute Comrade Leonard Peltier and his recent release from the colonial prison after, like I said, being locked up again for nearly 50 years. We salute this very powerful victory as part of the overall struggle to free all political prisoners. Next slide. And yeah, like I mentioned a bit earlier, the Uhuru movement, has long been in support of the struggle to free Leonard Peltier. And like I said, here we have the photo of Comrade Biko Lumumba. You could sort of see him in the background, speaking at a rally to free Leonard Peltier in San Francisco in the 80s. Next slide. The struggle to free all political prisoners, of course, continues. So we say free Mumia Abu-Jamal and free all political prisoners that are still behind bars. We also want to salute Pam Africa and Ramona Africa, who have been, working in this relentless struggle to free Mumia. So salute. Next slide. We also want to say free Imam Jamil Alamin, who was formerly known as H. Rap Brown, who, was one of the many of revolutionaries of the Black Revolution of the 60s, who has been locked up, these past 25 years. So free Imam Jamil Alamin. Next slide. And we also want to say free Lisa Davis, vice chair of the Black is Black Coalition, who is facing these false charges by the state of New Jersey while she was at a rally. And you can sign the petition to drop the charges against Lisa at tinyurl.com/BIB Lisa Davis. And our chat moderators will work to put that link in the chat so you can go ahead and sign the petition that way. Next slide. And we, of course, want to salute the Uhuru 3 and their recent victory against the state. We have Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People Solidarity Committee, and Chair Jesse of Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Next slide. And we, of course, want to take the time now to, salute and say long live to all of our fallen comrades. Next slide. So long live to Comrade Brother Ralph Pointer, who, was a longtime member of the Black is Black Coalition, a fighter in the struggle to free all of our political prisoners, who also himself fought until the very end. So long live Ralph Pointer. We also salute and say long live Sam Nujoma of Namibia, pictured here with Chairman Omai Shatella. Sam Nujoma was leader of SWAPO, the Southwest African People's Organization, which was an anti-colonial organization fighting for the independence of Namibia. So long live Sam Nujoma. We also say long live to Comrade Gary Brooks, who we just lost toward the end of 2024, and for whom the Gary Brooks Black Power Community Garden in St. Louis is named. So Uhuru and long live. We also say long live Comrade Viola of the D12 organization. Comrade Viola was a longtime friend of the Uhuru movement and Chairman Omali Shatella as well. So Uhuru. And of course, speaking of D12, we want to salute them and all the supporters of Hands Off Uhuru and the Uhuru 3. So salute to you, to all of you, comrades. Thank you so much. So like I mentioned earlier, the Hands Off Uhuru Fightback Coalition is a non-sectarian organization that was created to defend the right to anti-colonial free speech, and it is made up of so many, over 150 individuals and organizations from across the political spectrum. We have the logos of just a few of them here on the next slide. If you see your org, go ahead and let us know in the chat, and especially if you don't see it, go ahead and drop it in the chat because we couldn't put all of them on this slide. We of course want to say thank you, Uhuru, and salute to everyone who was part of this historic Fightback Coalition. We recognize our victories, in this protracted struggle to free African people and colonize people throughout the world, but we also recognize, that the struggle continues, that it is indeed not over. Since July 2022 up to now, there have been ongoing political and economic attacks that are part and parcel of the overall repressive actions against the African liberation movement taking place, since the 1960s. Since the FBI raids, we've had the burning of our, red, black, and green flag, which happened in July 2022. We had the removal of petition signatures from change.org. We've had the closing of accounts, the withholding of funds, the burning of a church that was under contract that to be purchased for community development in North St. Louis. And we've, of course, had slanderous media attacks in, local newspapers and media as well, bourgeois media as well. Next slide. And the same repression is now shown through, the move to block the opening of the, Uhuru Bakery Cafe in North St. Louis. Actually, one more slide next. Thank you. That is being built to combat the food desert that African people in St. Louis suffer from. And, we will hear more about this struggle and the recent victory from DC Ona's presentation. So stay tuned for that. Since the attack, we've had over 100 media interviews, articles, and commentary, working to get the story of the Uhuru 3 out into the world and fighting against the information encirclement that, we had found ourselves in. We also held over, 100 webinars, events, rallies, and appearances on the ground. Next slide. And then one more slide next, actually. And all of this work is, of course, culminated in the September 3 trial of the century that took place in Florida. And we, again, thank our supporters for making the trip from all over the world to see the unfolding of this historic trial and victory. Next slide. And so that is why we say, the US government lied and lost, and the Uhuru movement told the truth and won. We also want to salute, our brilliant attorneys, Addie Griffin, Mutaki Akbar, Leonard Goodman, Angela Rainey, Tom Inskeep, and just the whole legal team in this, really brutal but also amazing process. So thank you to our brilliant attorneys. Next slide. And like I said, the fight is not over, and we will work to appeal. And we want to, call on our comrades to help us get to $2,000 to raise the legal funds for the appeal. And, you could do that at handsoffuhuru.org/donate, and we will be putting that in the chats as well. And so, of course, thanks to you, comrades, the Uhuru 3 case has shown just how strong the power of the people is when we are united. And that is why we say the people united will never be defeated. Uhuru. So, comrades, now we want to get into the first bit of our program where we will take a sneak peek at the long history of African people's resistance and liberation movement, of which we are both inheritors and practitioners. So let's go ahead and get that presentation up. All right, thank you. Okay, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. We, of course, want to begin by saying that, it was the colonial assault on Africa and the expropriation of our labor and resources that, Chairman Omali has termed the colonial mode of production that built parasitic capitalism in the world economic system that we live under today. Next slide. There were countless attacks of resistance by African people to European invasion and colonization of Africa, and we will go over just some of them because going through all of them will not be humanly possible. And so a first example that we have here is the Beja people of what is now Sudan, who resisted European invasion since Roman times, and we have them pictured here. There's also a Queen Nzinga who was alive between 1583 to 1630 who fought the Portuguese in what is now Angola. Nzinga, made no concessions to the Portuguese slave trade and the kidnapping of African people. And in her 60s, no less, Nzinga led an army that waged guerrilla warfare against the Portuguese. And that is why we say African women must lead. Shout out AMWO, the African National Women's Organization, led by Comrade President Nyejide Ordumila. We also have Queen Mother Ya Santua, who was a fierce fighter who raised and led an army of 5,000 against the British colonizers. And, she's a beloved hero in Ghana today. In the 1800s, there were the Zulu Wars of Southern Africa. The Zulu fought the British colonizers for 100 years and trained an army of 20,000 people and won just many powerful victories against the British colonialism there. Toward the end of the 1800s, in the 1890s, there were the Matabele Wars in Zimbabwe, where Ndembele resistance fighters waged fierce resistance against British colonizers that was led by Cecil Rhodes. And then making our way across the Atlantic, we have another fierce struggle taking place by African people who were captives all across the Americas and, fought the slave master, resisted, and escaped on the daily. So in 1730, we have the Stono Rebellion in South Carolina. Stono was the largest uprising of African people in the American colonies under England, where, African people staged several insurrections, seized arms, killed whites, and burned houses. And, with the sheer force of their will, they held their own against the British for more than a week. In 1800, we have Gabriel's Rebellion in Virginia, led by Gabriel Prosser, who was inspired by the African Revolution of Haiti, and he sought to raise an army of 1,000 Africans who would march to Richmond with the slogan "Liberty or Death." And of course, Gabriel and 25 other African people were hanged for this courageous resistance. Further down south, we have the Louisiana African Rebellion in 1811, where the Haitian Revolution also inspired another uprising. And Charles Delande, he led a group of Africans to take over a plantation and seize, military uniforms, guns, ammunitions, what have you, to really start this rebellion. In 1831, we have the famous Nat Turner Rebellion that just drove absolute fear in the white slave masters and their families. With the motto of strike at night and spare no one. Nat Turner and 70 other armed African resistance fighters attacked 15 homes, killing 60 white people, including Turner's own slave master. And Turner ended up eluding authorities for more than a month after this uprising. And then moving further south in the Americas, we have Bussa's Rebellion in Barbados, which took place in 1816, which was actually the largest slave revolt in Barbadian history. And going a bit backwards now in time, we have the Wolof Rebellion in San Domingo in 1522, where enslaved Africans rose up against Christopher Columbus's son on his sugar plantation, killing at least 9 white people. And most of the Africans actually escaped to the mountains, where they formed an independent Maroon community there with other indigenous people. Here on the next slide, we have an image of Solitude, who fought against the French army of Napoleon's and the island of Guadeloupe in the Caribbean while she was pregnant in 1802. So, like I said earlier, African women must lead. From 1655 till 1738, on the next slide, we also had the Maroon Wars of Jamaica, where formerly enslaved Africans, who made a community with indigenous people, would periodically come out of, their homes and give the British hell through organized attacks and raids on the plantations. And probably one of the most important events in the history of African people's resistance was, the Haitian Revolution that took place just in the beginning of the 19th century. It was the, first successful anti-colonial struggle in history that influenced African resistance and other anti-slavery and anti-colonial movements in the US and throughout the Caribbean and South America, from which the phrase coupe tête boule caille, or cut heads, burn houses, now comes from. It was begun by Toussaint Louverture and completed by Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Next slide, please, where the victorious revolution defeated Napoleon's imperialist army, the strongest army of its time. If you guys remember, Napoleon's empire was kind of everywhere, and it established the first liberated African state in the world. And in liberated Haiti's, in liberated Haiti, slavery was abolished by an African government, and African and oppressed peoples from anywhere in the world were given safe haven in Haiti. Um, and then in tandem with African resistance, next slide, please, there was also a long history of indigenous resistance beginning throughout the 17th century. An example on the next slide is Goyakla, also known as Geronimo, who led raids against the U.S. in the defense of indigenous people and land. And this is the same struggle that the American Indian movement, through comrades like Leonard Peltier, continued the same struggle down into the 20th century. Next slide. And then making our way into the 20th century, we have Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association, established in the early 20s. The UNIA had a worldwide membership in the millions. And in 1920, they held the first international convention of the Negro people of the world at Madison Square Garden in New York. And the convention was attended by 25,000 people with contingents of African people from just nearly every country in Africa, the Caribbean, as well as throughout the US. The UNIA also famously had the Black Star Line, that was a shipping company created to connect African people throughout the world and, create trading relationships from which African people could benefit, using Africa's resources for African people, right? Africa, for at home and abroad. Next slide. And so making our way back to the continent, we have the Mau Mau Rebellion in Kenya in the mid-century. Mau Mau was the popular name of the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army headed by Dedan Kimathi, who led the anti-colonial struggle against British colonialism in Kenya. And the Mau Mau, the majority of whom were the Kikuyu people, popularized the Swahili slogan, Uhuru. So in case you didn't know where we got Uhuru from, now you know. Next slide. At the same time, in the 60s, the Black Revolution of the 60s was growing and intensifying in the US. It evolved out of the civil rights movement in the US South, and the Black Revolution of the 60s was the dominant movement in the US from about 1965 to 1973. And this is where the masses of African people, waged a powerful resistance against for basic civil rights, to vote, to end Jim Crow, apartheid laws, and just the miserated conditions of Black people everywhere. And the most influential organizations, of the early years was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, of which Chairman Omali was a part, and of course the Black Panther Party as well. Next slide. And throughout the latter half of the 20th century, we also have just an explosive resistance movements taking place all over the continent. There was the liberation struggle in Tanzania, or what is called South Africa. Next slide. There was the struggle in Namibia against German colonialism in Southwest Africa, and that's also actually another picture of Sam Nujoma there on the right-hand side with his fist up. We also had, revolution in Angola and Mozambique throughout the efforts of the MPLA, the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, and Frelimo. We also had, Cabral in Western Africa fighting the Portuguese with the PAIGC. So African people all over the world, were waging just this fierce resistance against colonialism, ever since that initial attack, centuries past. Next slide. So it is with the same, revolutionary tradition and heritage that the African Socialist International, founded by Chairman Omali and then now directed by Secretary General Louise Kinshasa, today continues this work, wherever African people are located. Uhuru. So, that was a brief overview of this really rich tradition of African resistance that the African Liberation Movement, today works from to usher in the African Revolution and the liberation of all colonized peoples throughout the world. Uhuru. So, with that, comrades, we want to go ahead and move the program on to our first presenter. It is, my absolute honor to introduce the Deputy Chair of the African People's Socialist Party and the architect of the Black Power Blueprint, Ona Zane Shatella. So go ahead and come on, Uhuru, and welcome DC Ona.
Uhuru, comrade, how you doing, Soyana? I just really appreciate that, that amazing overview and history of African resistance. So I know I have a presentation. Is it coming up? Yeah, I just want to really appreciate Hands Off Uhuru for inviting me to be a speaker here today. And next slide. Again, my name is Ona Zanea Shatella. I'm the board president for the African People's Education and Defense Fund. I am the architect of the Black Power Blueprint and also the vice chair, the vice president of Black Star Industries. Next slide. I want to begin by recognizing and saluting the profound leadership of Chairman Amali Shatella, who for over 50 years has dedicated his life to overturning the social system so Africa and African people can be free in this lifetime. Next slide. I also want to salute the HOU chairwoman, S.G. Mwezi, who has taken on this leadership of leading Hands Off Uhuru for the past almost 3 years now, and also leading the African People's Socialist Party as the Secretary General. Next slide. I want to salute the courage of Uhuru 3, Chairman Amali Shatella, Chairwoman Penny Hess, and Chair Jesse Neville, known as the Uhuru 3, in their recent legal victory that concluded, next slide, not one day, not one dime. The Uhuru movement works for Black people, not Russia. Not one day, not one dime, December 16, 2024. The U.S. government lied and lost. The Uhuru movement told the truth and won. Next slide. So the Black Power Blueprint programs are on the ground here in North St. Louis. Many of you have already seen the profound rebuilding of North St. Louis that APDF has initiated. We have demolished buildings in our community that has been pushed in the state of decay, demoralizing our people and denying our children an opportunity to easily imagine a future of happiness and success, all on one corridor. Next slide. So this corridor is the West Florissant Avenue, and this is the reason why the city wants to stop us. As you can see in the map, we have about 13 different properties on one corridor. Next slide. So the chairman has said that the U.S. government attacked Uhuru 3 because of the economic work that we're doing right here in St. Louis. The political and economic are one. We cannot have one without the other. Next slide. So I just want to just start by saying, give you an overview of how this whole Uhuru Bakery struggle took place. We purchased the building for the Uhuru Bakery on January 26th of 2024. And then on May 28th, we applied for a permit with architectural team, and we submitted the plans to the building department. On August 27th, we were told that we needed a conditional use permit, and we were scheduled for a meeting on August of 2024. So it required a special permit for us to have a restaurant actually in a building that had been a restaurant for the past 20 years. So that was crazy. That was number one crazy. And then on September 3rd, the permit was actually denied. The city ignored more than 300 signatures of support and denied the permit. Next slide. So I'm just going to fast forward to February 12, 2025, where we were actually, before a Board of Adjustment hearing that just happened last Wednesday, as a matter of fact. Next slide. So the city stated that we need to do four things. We needed to have alderman support. We also needed neighborhood association support, and we also needed community support. And the fourth thing was the land use needed to fit the focus of the strategic land use plan. But of course, we did more than that, because we're the Uhuru movement, so we're the vanguard. Next slide. So USM Chair Jesse and USM Vice Chair Amanda prepared maps that showed the support from the neighborhood, and Jesse actually presented them at the hearing this past Wednesday. Next slide. So the first map that we presented showed the visual evidence of the support from the neighborhood by using maps. These maps shows that 90 bakery supporters live right in the College Hill neighborhood, exactly where the bakery would be located. Next slide. This particular map shows nearly 400 vacant properties in the College Hill neighborhood. Next slide. This map shows that the 90 addresses of the supporters were real. Not just addresses of vacant properties, but actually supporters that actually sign our petition to show that we canvass the whole neighborhood to get support. Next slide. So next up, we have Maureen Wagner, who is the director of Uhuru Foods. Maureen actually spoke about the long and successful track record of Uhuru Foods and Pies, which bakes and sells 5,000 pies each year during the fall holidays. She gave a vision of Uhuru Bakery and Cafe, including talking about the food would be testified. Uhuru Bakery and Cafe has plans to serve breakfast, sandwiches and slingers, lunch sandwiches, including vegetarian and vegan option, crab cake, delicious dishes using special homemade jerk sauce and veggie burgers from scratch. Plans also including welcome volunteers from nearby university and having an open view of customers to actually watch their food being prepared. Next slide. So I just really want to salute the leadership of SG and Wazy under the leadership of Director Akile. They, brought Sandy Thompson in, who pulled all together the media bliss that we took on. The team included Raya, Jan, Indigo, Becky, Diana, Kumba, Mariah, Redbeard, Wendy, and Paul. And I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. This was a big team who came together. I met with SG and Wazy and told her that, we were in this struggle, and I could Hands Off Uhuru team along with Ajabra take this on, and she said yes immediately. So these comrades went to work. Next slide. So we also got from this team, we got 3 media sources to actually come into the hearing on last Wednesday to be a part of, hopefully, making a story happen. And 2 of them did. Next slide. We also got Ward 14 Alderman Rasheen Aldridge to write a letter. And this is what he said, and I quote, "This property has historically been a restaurant. It is on the West Florissant corridor where there is no options for healthy food. Our community came together over pastries, lunch, and coffee." Next slide. We also got a letter from Representative Marlon Anderson, who's over District 76. And Marlon stated, "I support this new business in my district that help brings our community together. I believe that Uhuru Bakery and Cafe is one such business." Next slide. We also got a letter from the committeeman, Anthony Bell, for the 14th Ward. And he stated, "The owner of this property and applicants for permits, the African People's Education and Defense Fund, has a track record for improving properties in this area." Next slide. So we also got a letter from the president, Christopher Glandley, from the North Independent Neighborhood Association. And I quote him. He said, "The goal of NINA is to bring together College Hill and the neighboring Northside communities to build unity for prosperities, commerce, neighborhood collaboration, and revitalization." Next slide. So we also, showed the committee that we were out doing the outreach. So we got more signatures. We went to some specific residents who we knew were supportive and targeted outreach to the blocks near the bakery. We offered people rides to the Uhuru House for the hearing and did callbacks the last day before the hearing to actually bring them here, right here where we're sitting at right now at the Uhuru House. Next slide. He also hired an attorney, Dan Emerson, and at the hearing, he testified that APDF invested over $1 million in Northside St. Louis community, and that APDF advocates for all residents of the community it serves, regardless of race. He emphasized the history of APDF in partnering with the Uhuru Foods and Pies. He stated that the purpose use of the property would contribute to enhance and promote the general welfare of the community and meet zoning regulation. He also challenged the standing of the College Hill Neighborhood Association that opposed the bakery, saying that At best, it had a loose affiliation with the city, and that they unresponsive, openly hostile, and had no track record of revitalization in the neighborhood. Next slide. So here is the Board of Adjustment Hearing Committee members: Anthony Robertson, who was the chair, Mel, Irene, Joe, and George. This was the committee that made up the people who were going to hear and make a decision on whether the bakery would move forward or not. Next slide. So we had testimonies of support from all over the world, actually, and from the Northside community. This is where they really wanted to see support. Next slide. So we had Tamika Saggers. She has the 100-member Northside Business Association, and she operates a popular hair salon. Um, and she said the Uhuru Bakery Cafe will provide jobs and food to a food desert. There is a defined need for a restaurant for our community to come together in North St. Louis to eat. Not granting this permit is sending the wrong message. She also noted that this building had already been a restaurant and should be able to remain a restaurant, and that it's obvious that it's a great need. We should be able to sit down and have a glass of wine. Next slide. We also got support from Prince Carter, who is a longtime resident and business owner. Recalled that the North Side in the 1970s were a thriving community. He said, I witnessed the de-investment and deterioration over the years, and I saw Uhuru movement make investments and bring development to the community. So I joined the movement. Uhuru has done more for this community than the city over the last 40 years. They are a beacon of hope and inspiration. This organization is dedicated to upliftment and liberation in this community. Next slide. And we also had heard from Zaki Baruti, who is the President General of the Universal African Peoples Organization. And he said, this is a no-brainer in my humble opinion. They have a history of uplifting our community and would love to come there, and he would love to come there, sit down, and have a great conversation. This is something the community is in need of. He went on to say that he encouraged all of you here to join us there for a sip of wine and eat the delicious pies. Next slide. We also heard from Karen Gurrier, who operates a home healthcare service in the North St. Louis. She has been in business for over 20 years, and she said, I advise the city to take their foot off of the necks of this organization. We do not have any restaurants in our community. I was a recipient of the ARPA funds and put a mural up. I'm just asking that all these grants, that this committee grant to permit and take the foot off the necks of this movement. Next slide. And we had Jesse Todd, who is the people alderman, and he said, I have witnessed them uplift the neighborhood here since 2017. People said that the basketball court would bring violence. Instead, it has brought the community together. 25% of our community is without a vehicle, and the nearest grocery store is over a mile away. I support APDF right to get this conditional use permit necessary to open Uhuru Bakery and Cafe. We also heard from Mary Rilla Jones from the 11th Ward, and she said, Uhuru has shown respect for this community. She said that African people in the community do not have money to eat out, and if ignorant to the think that we don't. When it's time to eat, have a cup of coffee or tea, have a glass of wine, or meet with friends, we have to leave our community, and that is so unfortunate. I think the rejection of this application is a disrespect to the residents of this community. We heard from Rosalind Luna, who is a real estate professional, and she said, I've seen firsthand the impact that this organization has had, not just of businesses, but as a force for our revitalization. Uhuru Bakery and Cafe will foster pride in our neighborhood. I know many people who love their pies and will support their business. When we support their business, we support our community. Next slide. We heard from our own Fofique recalled that while she was educated in St. Louis and a product of the city at the age of 12, she could not bring her children to North St. Louis because it wasn't safe. That is, until the recent development of the West Florissant corridor. She asked the Board of Adjustment, why is it that why is there a denial of this permit when this is our people investing in our own community and our own city? I have to travel to find food. I am a nurse and I know what it is to find healthy food and promote healthy eating. Next slide. So we had others who testified: Sheila, Tiana, Robin, Lisa Davis from, Hands Off Uhuru and the Black is Black Coalition, Bob, Betty Davis from Hands Off Uhuru and the Black is Black Coalition, Angelique, Angelica, and so many others. Next slide. So we also had to listen to opposition testimonies. So next slide. So here are 5 people who came to oppose this permit: Devontae Sanders, Terry Rose, Tiffany Davis, Pamela Saunders, and somebody named Isaac. Devon Sanders is a neo-colonialist representing a long dormant college here neighborhood association. Said the group had retaliated. Pardon me. The group's strong opposition to her bakery and cafe. So next slide is it took about 32 minutes for deliberations. Next slide. So here is the members of the Board of Adjustment that took the vote. So it took them like we were in this meeting for like 4 hours. The Board of Adjustment male, the vice president of a commercial group, and he said that he had looked at all the addresses on the petitions and noted that there were no questions, that many of the neighbors in the block right near the bakery had signed the petition. In fact, the neighborhood is overall generally supportive of the bakery. He concluded that the bakery would be a good idea. And then the chair, Anthony Robertson, and the board member, George, concurred. And Hitt argued that people in the neighborhood should have the biggest say. Chair Robinson countered that opposition of the College Hill Neighborhood Association to the right of APDF to apply later for an alcohol license to serve beer and wine with their meals, saying, I understand a lot of establishments can't make things work without it, but I also view the bakery cafe differently than I would a convenience store or a gas station selling alcohol. The board took a vote. All were in favor of issuing a conditional use permit, and the denial was overturned. Next slide. So the board voted ununanimously to overturn the permit of the denial. Next slide. So I always have this quote: when we fight, we win. Next slide. So I really want to just sum up where this happened and what happened. So we had 100 and plus supporters at that meeting online. We had 25 people who actually spoke at the hearing. We had 330 plus supporters who signed letters and petitions and wrote in. We had the Northside Independent Neighborhood Association. We had the St. Louis Business Coalition, the politicians who wrote letters of support. We had our attorney, and we had Hands Off Uhuru, APSP, Agitprop, NPDUM, and USM. Next slide. So here are some of the names of some of the people who attended that hearing. Like I said, we had over 110 plus people on that hearing in support of Uhuru Bakery and Cafe winning our permit. So these are just some of the names here on this slide. Next slide. So the city told us that the hearing was different than any other hearing that they ever had. They had never had that many people on a hearing, for number one. Number two, the hacking, they only seen once since before and was able to get rid of it, but not this time. So in between our meeting, we were hacked like 3 or 4 times of pornography that came up on the screen. And 3, they had never had media representation in a hearing before. So we had Channel 4, Channel 5, and we had St. Louis NPR in that meeting the entire hearing. Next slide. So now we can go forward to secure the building permit, begin the renovation, provide needed employment in our community. Our local contractors have been on standby and are ready to go. We are grateful for all of our supporters from all around the world. Will continue to fight for all of Northside businesses to get fairly treated by the city. We look forward to welcoming everybody to the new Uhuru Bakery Cafe, and you can support or volunteer with the Uhuru Bakery and Cafe at contact us as stl@uhurufoods.org. And I just want to say that we are the vanguard leading the economic process. Our economic work is revolutionary work. Uhuru.
Uhuru, DC Ona, thank you so much for that really, really thorough presentation. It's always really amazing and just personally for me, reinvigorating to hear about, the work that APEDF is undertaking and leading. It's really great to hear how so many people came together to testify in support of the bakery and cafe and, the struggle for self-determination, because that's what we're trying to do, right? And I'll also add, that the struggle around the bakery cafe will be our front page story of the March issue of the Burning Spear, and so you can read you can read all the testimonials there. So make sure that you are subscribed to the Burning Spear newspaper at theburningspear.store. So have that for yourself as well. So Uhuru, thank you so much for that presentation, DC Ona.
Uhuru Conrad, thank you.
Of course. And I of course want to, recognize some of the folks here with us, in the chat. I saw Comrade Jan, Comrade Luke from London. We have Comrade Charlie, Uhuru. Let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always good to hear, the geography of where people are at. So go ahead and do that. I also want to remind folks that we do have the goal of raising $2,000 to fund that appeal for the Uhuru 3. So if you haven't already, you can go to handsoffuhuru.org/donate. And our chat moderators will be putting that, that in the link in the chat for you. So go ahead and do that. So moving on with this amazing program, comrades. Up next, we have Comrade Cam Howard. It is always a pleasure to have with us Comrade Cam of Reparations United and the Black is Back Coalition. Cam is on the front lines of the struggle for reparations to African people, and we are honored to have him here with us. So Uhuru and welcome, Cam.
Uhuru family, it's a great pleasure to be here. It's always a great historical opening of our collective struggle against imperialism for decades internationally, as well as here in the United States. Great presentation on the victory of the Uhuru Bakery and Cafe. Salute again, as it was stated in the chat, Deputy Chair, for the great victory. It demonstrates superb leadership, wedded to people power and organization. And so that's been historically consistent with the African People's Socialist Party. So we expected nothing less than the victory here because of that great leadership, organization, and rallying of the people to achieve victory in our struggle. So big ups to the party, big ups to Deputy Chair. I don't have a presentation, but I just want to talk a little bit about reparations in this current era that we're in. Now, we had spent the last 18 months prior to the election trying to demonstrate to President Biden that there was political will in this country for reparations. And what we meant by political will is that among leaders, there was a willingness to move on a particular issue. And that particular issue was Reparations Commission. We knew that we weren't going to get reparations out of the federal government, but a commission has historically been the process that has been used to move this country to act on major issues. Sometimes they'll do it just because they want to do it, but we know that, with the Japanese, there was a commission, there was a claims commission for the indigenous Americans in the 1950s, and the HR 40 Reparations Commission was patterned after the Japanese Reparations Commission. Congressman Conyers at the time, in 1988, when the Japanese were able to amass a victory, they went through the commission process. I think 7 years earlier, the commission came back, and it took them about 7 years to get that victory. And so Congressman Conyers introduced in 1989 HR 40 for the first time. And we had been just pushing that legislation for 20 plus years. Now it's like 36 years because it was recently introduced again, and I'll talk about that in a second. But in the last 2 years, with this Democratic president, we've been pushing very hard. We have been pushing very hard for an executive order establishing the Reparations Commission. In the previous Congress, with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who's now an ancestor, she was able to get the bill voted out of the committee, Judiciary Committee, for the first time, to move that bill to the House of Representatives for a vote. It didn't happen. And those of us who were organizing for that victory, and it was a major victory, historic victory, we wanted to get it passed in the House, again, only to show that there was political will in one House of Congress for this bill to be passed. And we were simultaneously, we were pushing, getting more and more co-sponsorship at the Senate side for S40, but understanding that we weren't going to get that bill passed in the Senate, even with a 50-50 tie with the Democratic vice president who would break the tie. We knew that you would need 60 votes in the Senate to block a filibuster, which we were certain that there would be if this bill went to the Senate. So our goal was to pass the bill out of the House, get as much co-sponsorship in the Senate, and press this bill, press the president to sign it. We didn't get the vote, and then the Democrats lost to Congress. So we knew that bill was not going to even come up in the last Congress. But we still wanted to press that we had the political will within the Democratic Party, or that he had the political will within the Democratic Party. We messaged him, Reparations United. We hired a high-powered marketing firm to message what they call President Biden's Atlas, his influencers. It was over 750 of his closest influencers, whether they're professional, political, or personal influencers. And we sent over 2 million messages to them, telling them, hey, Biden, tell your president, tell your leader that the only way he's going to win in 2024 is if he establishes Reparations Commission. Too many Blacks were not filling them. 2.9 million, according to our research, was saying in 2022, that they were not going to vote in 2024, would vote for Trump or would vote third party. And we messaged him that he couldn't win with 2.9 million Black defectors, and that if he wanted them back, that he had to establish a Reparations Commission. We pointed out that 88% of the Democratic lawmakers in Congress at that particular time, out of the 218 Dems in the House and the 50 Dems in the Senate, 88% had signed on to the legislation, almost 9 out of 10 Democratic lawmakers. And that was over 200 and probably 30 or so, 240 so Democrats in Congress, which meant that the majority of the legislators who signed on were non-Black, because there was only 56 Black lawmakers, 57, 58 if you look at in the Senate. And we had over 200 and close to 240 plus co-sponsors, or those who said they would sponsor if they would vote yes if it came to the floor. And so we demonstrated we had almost 90% of Democrats in Congress. We pointed out that the three largest cities in America, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago all had reparations legislation, reparations task force or subcommittees or commissions. And the states in those, where those three largest cities rested, California, New York, California, and Illinois, the governors of those states had signed reparations commissions and task force. So the three largest cities and the states within those three largest cities had both city and state legislation for reparations. And we also pointed out to the president that there were over 100 state and local initiatives around the country, all being led by Democratic lawmakers, state reps, city councilmen, county councilmen, and women all around the country were pushing reparations. So we demonstrated there was political will within his party. And we also showed him that there was a major shift in support nationwide. From 2019, we had a Huffington Post poll, and in 2024, Liberation Ventures did a poll, and we were able to compare those numbers from 2019 to 2024 on the issue of support for a reparations commission. So in 2019, 76 of Blacks who were polled, 76% either supported or were neutral. In 2024, that number had increased to 94%. Only 6% of Blacks actually opposed a reparations commission in 2024. When you look at white voters in 2019, 43% supported or were neutral or unopposed. In 2024, that number went up to 66%, meaning that only 34% of whites across the board actually oppose a reparations commission. And that's not what we're hearing in the news when we say that, when they're saying 70% of whites or 80% of whites oppose reparations. What those numbers actually mean is that they oppose cash payments. But when you look at the numbers that we have, only 34% of whites across America oppose a reparations commission. And when we looked at it from a political party perspective, the number was 80% in 2019 of Democrats supported or were unopposed to a reparations commission. In 2024, that number went up to 88%, meaning only 12% of Democrats voters actually opposed a reparations commission. When we looked at Republicans, we saw a similar increase. In 2019, 25% of Republicans either supported or were unopposed to a reparations commission. Most of that were neutral. 53%, it jumped up to 53% in 2024 who were either supported or unopposed, meaning that less than half of Republicans in 2024 actually opposed a reparations commission. So we had demonstrated to this president that there was political will for a reparations commission. And we messaged him time after time. Again, over almost 2 million social media messages. And I think we had maybe 300,000 videos, short videos, 15-second videos that had a 90% watch completion rate. In some instances, some was like 93%. And the average was like 78% that people will watch these videos to completion before they cut off. We had a 90+% video watch completion rate with all of our videos. And we had probably 25, 30 videos that we ran during that period. So he was aware, but he chose not to act. And as a result, we told him that he would lose, and as a result, he did lose the election. And now we have Trump. And people are wondering, what do we do in the reparations movement in the area of Trump? Well, I say we do the same thing we did with any president. We fight. We don't care if it's a Trump or a Nixon or a Roosevelt or Obama or Clinton. We fought with all of these leaders of the settler colonial state, and we continue to fight. Federally, we know there's 3 branches of government: judiciary, the executive, and congressional. And we know with the judiciary branch, the courts are unfavorable. They shot down affirmative action and any race-based legislation. At the executive branch, the president is unlikely to do anything, with this attack on DEI. And congressionally, the Democrats are unable. They're in the minority in both houses. And we have already seen anti-reparations legislation introduced by Republicans in the last Congress that moved nowhere. We believe that there will be more Republican anti-reparations legislation coming forward as we continue to move forward. However, even with this, we continue to lift up the congressional legislation, HR 40 and S40, as organizing tools, as a reminder to this government that we are still fighting, we still are demanding justice, we're not giving up. With the death of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley out of Boston picked up the legislation in the House. We quickly moved to get her some co-sponsors. She says she's willing to fight. It's a new leader, and we'll just have to support her in that effort and see where it goes. But certainly we know that congressionally it's not going to move. But again, we continue to demonstrate that there's political will for the legislation. And Senator Cory Booker reintroduced it on the Senate side. What we can also do at the federal level is something novel that we're looking at, that I witnessed when President Biden apologized to the Native Americans for the boarding school crimes. And my mind was, how did that happen? And so as I look back and looked at what actually took place when he became president, he nominated an Indigenous American as the secretary of the Department of Interior. And as soon as she got in office, she established through her executive powers an investigatory committee. Now, this investigatory committee was designed to study and suggest proposals for how to deal with the crimes of boarding school atrocities that were committed by this government. Now, if you read the legislation, or you read the, wasn't legislation because it didn't come through Congress, but if you read the administrative order, it sounds exactly like HR 40. And out of that study, out of that investigation, there were recommendations. And one of those recommendations was an apology. And there were probably 10 others, some around their indigenous language, learning their indigenous language, and establishing some cultural resources for other aspects of reestablishing their culture. But the apology was in that legislation. And so what we saw was that through the executive body, it wasn't through the president, but through a cabinet, there's areas that you can move specific legislation or deal with a specific harm and not the overall harm. They didn't try to look at indigenous genocide and theft of land, but they looked at one particular issue, and that was boarding school crimes. So that gives us a vision, if you will, on what can we do federally at the executive level, because again, nothing's happening in the courts, nothing happening in Congress at the federal level, but are there some cabinet secretaries that we may be able to move in this particular fashion? And so one of the ones that I see is Kennedy, who's the chair of Secretary of Health. Now, Kennedy has been a proponent of alternative medicine, and he's also went on record to say he's going to put billions of dollars into alternative medicine. Well, we've always been talking about how the historical trauma that affected our people have caused us to have this transgenerational epigenetic inheritance of injury that leads to the type of illnesses that we're dominating in this country. So is there a possibility to work within the Kennedy office of the Department of Health in order to deal with this one issue of transgeneration epigenetic inheritance? And that's something that we've been working with, I've been working on for quite a while. And so we're going to pursue that on the federal level. We also must keep fighting at the local level. And this is where a lot of action is at right now. A lot of money that's in the movement is being targeted locally. And we look at Evanston, you know, was the first city that did a citywide piece. They've distributed almost $6 million and $25,000 implements to about almost 400 of their residents there. Initially, it was for housing. Now, the latter distribution was they can do whatever they want to do with their money. Look at Palm Springs. There was a victory, again, of about $6 million for land that was stolen in the 50s and 60s in that community from Blacks and indigenous folks in that community. That was a recent victory. I was in Boston last month. Brother Reverend Dr. Kevin Peterson has engaged the church community in Boston. The Episcopal Church has committed $13.1 million to a reparations fund there. So we see there's it's not the billions and trillions that we need, but there's incremental dollars that we can utilize for specific initiatives of harm at the local level, and we have to continue to push in that area. In that regards, we introduced last month a slavery disclosure and redress ordinance. Can someone let me know the time so I can wrap it up? But we introduced a slavery disclosure and redress ordinance in the state of Illinois that mandates corporations that have these ties to enslavement to research their records. They're obligated to not only disclose to the government, they must have a community disclosure event that the community can understand the crimes and atrocities they committed, and then they must contribute. They must initiate a redress finance statement. It could be anywhere from $0 to millions of dollars, but whatever they submit will go toward whether or not they'll get the contract or not. But it's mandatory that they disclose, and that's public disclosure as well as legislative disclosure, and it's mandatory that they submit a statement of financial redress. On the 6th of February, we introduced a companion bill in the Senate, and we're working now to get that bill moved through the state. We also have a national info sessions because we want local and state initiatives, slavery disclosure initiatives happening all around the country. And just yesterday, I'm going to end on this. The Chicago mayor, I'm in Chicago, the Chicago mayor who's taking a whole lot of flack around the migrants. I mean, they're beating him up, they're beating their brother up bad, but he had in the city council, they had a Black History celebration or recognition in the city council. They entered a resolution that acknowledged that February 25th is Reparations Awareness Day. That's the day that NCOBRA has established, probably in the late 90s, that this is the day that we talk about and have a simultaneous awareness around reparations around the country. So he acknowledged February 25th, that's Reparations Awareness Day in Chicago. And he honored many of the reparations activists. I was one among about 7 others who have been pushing this issue in Chicago for quite a while, and recommitted, the $500,000 toward the so-called study component and proposal component that we can use to bring back proposals that would seek funds for larger reparative initiatives. So that's where we're at in the reparations movement, calling everybody to continue to fight as we've always done under settler colonialism. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, Cam, for that talk and just update on the work that Reparations United is doing really on the reparations front of the African liberation movement. I really appreciated the overall presentation, but also the statistics that you provided, just showing how the struggle of African peoples for reparations has been something the government can no longer ignore, and you could just sort of see that reflected in the percentages that you provided. And I also appreciate you for putting the struggle for reparations in context, right? This webinar is dedicating to saluting and raising up the African history of resistance and the fight for reparations, to take back what is owed African people for our stolen and expropriated labor is part and parcel of that African liberation movement. So thank you so much, Comrade Camp, for that really great presentation, Uhuru. Comrades, I also want to really recognize the comrades who have donated so far. Salute Comrade Patrick for donating $50. Thank you so much, Comrade. Salute to Comrade Chair Jesse for also donating $50. Thank you so much, Comrade. And then salute Comrade Susan, who also donated $25. So thank you for all of those comrades who donated. If you haven't, you still can. You can go ahead and make your donation at handsoffuhuru.org/donate Uhuru. And then the link will be in the chat as well, so comrades can go ahead and do that. So comrades, up next, I am, very pleased to introduce Dr. Matsamela Odom, who is the president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. So Uhuru, President Matsamela.
All right, Uhuru, how y'all doing? Uhuru. So I'm excited to be a part of this webinar. I'm Matsamela Odom, the international president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. And like I said, I'm excited to be a part of this webinar, saluting African history. I want to begin by saluting Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, leader of the Uhuru Movement. I also want to salute all the leaders in the African People's Socialist Party, as well as the Hands Off Uhuru campaign and the multiple victories that we have sustained, be it the acquittals, the not one day, not one dime at the sentencing, as well as the subsequent defense of the Uhuru Bakery that we saw conclude with the success last week. I really appreciate what Deputy Chair Onizene Yeshitela had to say, especially some of the some of the quotations of the guest speakers I was able to be on for that hearing, and the way through which the African community of North St. Louis came out in defense of the Uhuru movement says a couple different things, especially when you speak about African history. Right. First off, some people, there's a way through which you can chart the origins of the Uhuru movement in 2014, coming to the African community in North St. Louis. But the truth is that through the impact of the Uhuru movement going back to the 1960s, we've already had our footprint there, but also understanding the way through which we picked up the mantle, the red, black, and green, and the movement of Marcus Garvey. We know that the movement and the political tendency through which we represent goes back many years, back to the 1920s. St. Louis is actually one of the oldest urban African populations in the whole United States. It's a place that has the oldest African secondary school west of the Mississippi, Sumner High School. But we also know that because of that, it's because of that history and what it means for African people, a history that's forged in resistance, that the African community has continuously come under attack. I mean, I was doing some research on this, but we put forward the Dred Scott City of Refuge initiative as a part of this campaign. And the Dred Scott case in St. Louis which was in St. Louis, was one of over 300, was called freedom suits that African people in St. Louis alone, from the early 1800s to the 1850s, waged for their freedom in St. Louis. But we know, of course, right, the freedom of African people is not simply going to be won inside a courthouse, but we do know the way through which that campaign then and the Hands Off Uhuru campaign now raised the contradiction of democracy to the level to where colonizers had to deal with it. So it's this rich history that comes under attack, but also it's this history of resistance that underscores the success of our campaigns. You know, tomorrow is African Martyrs Day. It actually marks the 60th anniversary of the assassination, the martyrdom of Malcolm X. This year marks the 100th birthday of Malcolm X, the 100th birthday of Robert F. Williams, I think the 100th birthday of Patrice Emery Lumumba, and somebody else whose birthday I'm also missing, of which would be their 100th birthday as well. So maybe someone can fill that in the chat for me. And it's important to hold up those people. It's important to hold up the observation. And the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, underneath the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, has been throwing events and will continue to throw events in observation of African Martyrs Day. It's in the proclamation for African Martyrs Day that says that the oppressors of African people have attempted to turn history upside down and present the heroic examples of our freedom fighters as evidence of the futility, the hopelessness of our cause for political independence, African liberation, and world socialism. But we know that it's the success of this campaign, Hands Off Uhuru campaign, which turns history right side up. The International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement was formed as a part of that campaign to turn a history right side up. Chairman Omale Shatella notes that, African people are, when we're meaning to be colonized, meaning we produce life, labor, value, but also history for the colonizer. And many of Africans walk around the United States with an example of that history that we produce for the colonizers, with being the last names that African people give. I mean, there's so many last names that that colonizers gave to Africans that it's more Africans with those last names. I think the last names like Davis, for example, which, and this doesn't come from nobody, but that's a Welsh last name. I'd assume that it's more Africans in the United States. The last name Davis and all the people in Wales and stuff like that. Well, that's Africans producing history for the colonizer and not history for ourselves. The languages we've been given, the names. Such as Afro, Chairman Omale talks about in Black identity, African identity is key. He does, and that's another excellent essay you all should check out, where he talks about the names we've been given, whether it be African American, Black Brit, Nigerian, Cameroonian. All these things represent the us producing history for our colonizers, not for ourselves. But in PDEM is an organization that was meant to sort of turn history right side up, place the sort of making of African history for ourselves. Officially founded April 6th, 1991. April 6th was important because that was the date in 1968 that Little Bobby Hutton, the youngest founding member of the Black Panther Party, was assassinated in Oakland, California, and Chicago, our founding location, was the place where in 1969, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were assassinated. One assassination signaling really the beginning of the United States government's counterinsurgency war against African people, against the Black Panther Party, and the December 4th, 1969 assassination of Fred Hampton, signaling the conclusion of that war. But the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement comes out of the campaign once again to overturn that. Like I said, we look at 1991, but the truth is that Impedim's looking at our 40th anniversary. Because it's in 1985 in Oakland, California, that the People's Democratic Uhuru Movement was formed underneath the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela following the successful community control of housing campaign. This was amidst the defense of African named Freddie Lee Roberts, who had been framed up for the killing of some police a police officer there in Oakland. It's also that campaign that saw Huey P. Newton, and you can see the historic image of Huey P. Newton and Chairman Omali Yeshitela at the at the Uhuru House behind me, in which he says, famously, you might not have the Black Panther Party, but you got the Black Panther newspaper, Black Panther Party, but you got the Uhuru House. You might not have the Black Panther newspaper, but you have the Burning Spear. So they didn't do anything by killing one organization, and that's absolutely true. I just end by saying this. Some people know that I want to say Impedim, the programs the Impedim regularly every Thursday actually holds a set of political studies. The studies are named after the mass program of the Impedim, the Revolutionary National Democratic Program. And to register for those, you can go to tinyurl.com/RNDP studies. But these are a different type of study because the focus of this study is to place the theory of African internationalism into practice, right? So you see this. Chairman Omaisetela notes that the two strengths of any movement is its ideology and the people, right? The people is the largest weapon that we have, and the Revolutionary National Democratic Program places us on the attack against colonial capitalism. So this is just all so important for us to say. And I'll just say this, I want to end with this. Some people know that I'm an Africana Studies professor. I got a doctorate in history. But there's so much stuff that I began to learn, not in the halls of academia, but once I came into membership in the Uhuru movement and subsequently into the African People's Socialist Party. One scholar, one African working class intellectual that I really hold up, and I was just talking about today in class, is Walter Rodney, who talks about this idea of being grounded. Because so often when people talk about history, especially when people find out that I've got a doctorate or something, I always get hit with the sort of what you call like the sort of "I bet you didn't knows," right? Oh, I bet you didn't know this, I bet you didn't know that, and things like that. There's a way through which a lot of people think that sort of the understanding of history has just become this sort of abstraction. But for Walter Rodney, for Louisa Kinshasa, whose they understand the role of the African intellectual in the world is to be grounded in the everyday struggles of African people, and that's really what the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement represents, and that's why I'm really excited to be a part of today's webinar. So Uhuru everybody, and salute the victory of the Hands Off Uhuru campaign, and forward until it's won. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Uhuru. Thank you so much, Dr. Masamala Odom, president of Impedum, for this really great talk that you just gave. I really appreciate you noting that, African Martyrs Day is tomorrow. And, as we talk about African resistance, obviously it's important to, hold up people, those individuals who have literally been killed in the process of fighting for, African people's liberation. And I also really appreciate you noting the essay, The African Identity is Key by Chairman Omar Chatela. That's one of my favorite pieces really to look at for political education studies. And it's published in this book right here, One Africa, One Nation. And surprise, surprise, you can get your own copy of this at the Burning Spear store. So, go ahead and get that for that essay and many more in this really, really amazing book. Also, I think in terms of groundings and talking about Walter Rodney reminded me of this book, The Groundings with My Brothers. I also recommend this book, not to make this a book recommending session, but Uhuru, thank you so much, Comrade, for that really amazing presentation. So next up, comrades, we will have Comrade Amanda come up, who will be leading our appeal portion of this program. So Comrade Amanda Uhuru.
Uhuru Soliana, thank you so much. I just want to, start by really appreciating all the presentations that we've heard so far today, and just salute the relentless fighting spirit of all these amazing revolutionary leaders. And just to add, I got to witness and participate in, as Deputy Chair Ona mentioned, the bakery struggle. And I want everyone to know that that bakery is going to be open because Deputy Chair Ona Zane always fights for the absolute best for African people. And I cannot wait to eat there and participate in that. And it's just another example of how when we fight, we win. So this is another example of us fighting and winning, this Hands Off Uhuru Fightback, being led by Chairman Amalia Shatella. I'm going to let them pull up my slideshow here in a second. And there it is. So this photo, walking out of the courthouse with chants of not one day, not one dime, that was an amazing struggle, and the fight is not over. We are still working to overturn the bogus conspiracy conviction that is now on the Uhuru 3, and overturning that conviction is not just for these three amazing people to no longer be considered felons, but it's for all of us, that we are allowed to have our anti-colonial free speech, to speak out in defense of African people, and to continue waging this fight back without fear of political repression. So we can go to the next slide here, and just say again that our goal for this webinar is $2,000, and that is part of our overall campaign to win $125,000 to be able to contribute to paying the legal defense team who is going to stay on for that for this appeal. And yeah, just want to take the time now to appreciate everyone who's contributed so far. We have Patrick, who gave 50, Jesse, one of the Uhuru 3, who gave 50, Susan, who gave 25, Jan, who gave 40, Penny, another one of the Uhuru 3, who gave 100, Luke, who I know had to leave, but thank you, Luke, who gave 40. I personally am going to be giving 100. We had Robert give 15. We had Chairman Amalia Shatella and Deputy Chair Ona Zane Shatella, who gave 100. MQ, who's giving 40. Lisa, who gave 50. Becky, who gave 20. Allison, who gave 35. Moisey, Chair Moisey of this campaign, who gave 100. And salute Chair Moisey and her new beautiful baby as well. Charlie, who gave 50. And then I just saw in the chat that Impedum is going to be giving 50 as well. And then Ruby is giving 40. So far we at $905. Thank you so much, everyone. We are almost halfway towards our goal just for this webinar, and we can go ahead to the next slide here. So how to give. So you can go to handsoffwho.org/donate. You can pay by card. You can pay directly via your bank account, PayPal. If you have a donor-advised fund and you want to give a larger amount through that process, they do make it very simple to be able to do that. If you have cryptocurrency that you want to contribute, you can give that way. If you have stocks that you want to contribute, you can give that way. No one has done either of those two yet, so if you want to be the first, go right ahead. Or you can give via Venmo. So there's plenty of options to be able to give. Or you can always send a check made out to Hands Off Uhuru to 2654 Gravois Avenue in St. Louis, Missouri, and we will be able to deposit those rather easily. So we can go to the next slide here. Again, our goal for this phase 3 of the campaign is to raise $125,000. And thanks to all of you, we have already raised $47,622 of this. This is from, funds left over from phase 2 and phase 1, and all of the contributions that you've made over the past 2 months. So that is where we are, and we can go to the next slide here. And the majority of that is to pay for the legal team. So including the cost of oral arguments, it's going to be $72,500 for these amazing attorneys. And, I just want to say we are working with them to get those contracts finalized so that we can start chipping away at this amount and, secure them as our legal team. Next slide here. And then I'm getting notes to look at the contribution page here. So we have Cam, who's going to give 100. So Uhuru Cam, that means we are halfway towards our goal. We're at $1,005 right now. So Uhuru, and just want to salute 2 amazing attorneys, Leonard Goodman and attorney Angela Rainey, who are going to continue through the appeal as a pro bono service. So this is a really significant contribution, and we cannot thank them enough. Two amazing, amazing, profound lawyers just doing a fantastic job with all of those, with the appeal coming up. So we can go to the next slide here. And this just a very simple breakdown of what the funds are going to. As you can see, the majority of it is for legal fees. So that's our main goal. We want to secure these lawyers. And then there's other costs associated with running this campaign, including promotional materials, tour costs, the mass text that you get, that has a little cost to it as well. And then we do have a fiscal sponsor, which allows all of your contributions to be, being given to a nonprofit, so they could be tax deductible. And that has a couple fees associated to that as well. So go to the last slide here. And yeah, I just want to, again, really appreciate everyone. So I really want to encourage people. We have only 995 left to go for this goal for this webinar. And I want to really encourage everyone to contribute what you can. I see Belinda Uhuru is giving 60. Uhuru, Belinda, Parker Brown. Really appreciate that. And yeah, you also, if you can't give today, but you want to contribute to this campaign, you can let us know that today as well. If you want to contribute, the cost of one of the lawyers, about $30,000, you can do that. We can, work with you to have that be paid over time. If you want to give $1,000 over the next couple of months, you can let us know that now, and we will work with you to make sure all of that gets in. But we want to really chip away at this overall goal here, and just pay all these lawyers, and keep winning this fight, because we know that when we fight, we win. So I just want to see if there's anyone else. You let me know in the chat if you're able to contribute anything, and I will keep looking over here. And I see Uhuru. So we're going to go to announcements now, but I just want to really appreciate everyone who gave, and keep contributing as we're going through the announcements, and we'll keep thanking everyone. But thank you all so much. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Amanda, for leading that portion. And yes, I really want to salute everyone who have contributed, and you still have the opportunity to do that. So go ahead and donate at handsoffuhuru.org/donate, and just salute to everyone who did contribute. So we can move on to announcements. I believe we do have slides for that as well. Go ahead and wait for that. All right, thank you. So first up, we want to, demand that the state of New Jersey drop bogus charges against Black Fightback Coalition Vice Chair Lisa Davis. Her trial is scheduled for tomorrow, Friday, February 21st at noon Eastern. Lisa has been, targeted, racially profiled, and, falsely charged for attending a pro-Palestine weekly ceasefire vigil in South Orange, New Jersey, where she was accosted by an unhinged Zionist, and she, stood up for herself. And now the state is seeking to punish her instead of, the person that was accosting her. She was the only Black person at the vigil of approximately 20 people that day, and is the only one the state is going after. So like I said earlier, you can go ahead and sign the petition at tinyurl.com/BIB Lisa Davis, tinyurl.com/BIB Lisa Davis. Our chat moderators will go ahead and put that in the chat. And then you can, of course, visit handsoffuhuru.org/events for more details on how you can support this struggle and, drop the charges against Comrade Lisa. Next up, tomorrow, Friday, February 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central, you can join the African People's Socialist Party for a webinar recognizing African Martyrs Day. It'll be featuring Chairman Omali Shatella, African Socialist International, SG Luwezi Kinshasa, and from APSP South Africa, Tafari Sindisa Mugeri. You can watch the live stream on the Burning Spears TV YouTube channel and on the Facebook pages of APSP USA and Chairman Omali's Facebook page as well. On Wednesday, February 26th at 6:30 p.m. Central Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, you can join the African People's Solidarity Committee for an event addressing the current deepening crisis of colonialism as manifested by the Trump administration 2.0. The event will feature special guests like Chairman Omali Shatella and Onezene Shatella, the architect of the Black Power Blueprint. And this event will show, how white people can fight back against Trump by joining the solidarity movement under the leadership of the African Revolution. And you can register for the event at apscuhuru.org/register, apscuhuru.org/register. This will also be on the Hands Off Uhuru events page. On Saturday, March 1st at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central, you can join the Hands Off Uhuru Fightback Coalition and the official Leonard Peltier Support Committee for an event celebrating the victory for Leonard Peltier and the Uhuru 3. It'll be featuring, of course, Somalia Shatella and others. You can stay tuned again to this event at handsoffuhuru.org/events for more details coming soon regarding this particular event. And then Saturday, Sunday, March 15th and the March 6th till March 16th in St. Louis, Missouri, you can attend the 2025 Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention. And for all the info and registration information surrounding that, you can go to tinyurl.com/USM convention. And that'll also be in the chat. And of course, the Burning Spear newspaper, of which I am managing editor, is now taking pre-orders for the March issue. You can get your bundles to distribute in your community. You can go do this at theburningspear.store. And then for subscriptions, you can go to theburningspear.com/subscribe. You can get, digital copies only if you want. You can get just one copy every month if you want, or you can get bundles of 25, 50, 100, 200 if you want. So go ahead and do that. And then, of course, join the Hands Off Uhuru Fightback Coalition. We want to, salute to our growing list of endorsers with over 200 supporting organizations and individuals. And of course, for more info on this, you can go to handsoffuhuru.org/coalition. And of course, you can stay connected with the Hands Off Uhuru Fightback Coalition at handsoffuhuru.org. We're on, Facebook at Hands Off Uhuru. We're on Instagram, X, also known as Twitter. And then you can, of course, visit handsoffuhuru.org/shop to get Hands Off Uhuru shirts and more, including the latest shirt design, Kick the Ass of the Ruling Class, produced by Uhuru Planet Reparations Apparel. So you can do that there. And of course, you can stay tuned for more upcoming events, because we promise you, if there's nothing we don't like, it's events. And you can go ahead and do that at handsoffuhuru.org/events. Uhuru. So that is the last of the announcements. I just really, really want to thank everyone for coming to this amazing webinar, full of really amazing people who are involved in so many different kinds of works and, realizing the African liberation and, realizing the African Revolution, really. So just Uhuru and salute. Hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. Uhuru.